Harness your independent voice. Together, we make it heard. Are you willing to accept the challenge? Welcome to Independent Voice. We believe in the power of independent thinking, where truth triumphs over negativity, and where your voice can spark change. Join us as we explore the vibrant tapestry of independent voices and open minds, united by a shared goal: to inspire ourselves and others to think, speak, and act with independence and courage. At IV, we are dedicated to amplifying voices that often go unheard. Whether you're here to be informed, contribute, or find inspiration, your voice is vital in shaping the conversation. Together, we can illuminate pathways to a paradigm shift towards independent thinking and strong perspectives. Independent Voice, where authenticity meets integrity, harnessing thoughts and igniting change. Subscribe now and unleash the power of your independent voice. Our goal is to make a difference that lasts. Let's put forth our will behind truth and integrity. Ready to be heard?
Beyond tariffs, the human cost of trade policy on Ethiopia. Welcome to Independent Voice, where integrity matters, voices are free, and transparency leads the conversation. Today, we continue to urge calling attention to a policy decision with far-reaching consequences: the Trump administration's imposition of tariffs on Ethiopia. This is more than a trade story, it's a human story, one that affects livelihoods, migration, development, and the future of an entire region. Join us as we explore the facts, the fallout, and the call for a more humane and strategic approach to international trade. Background on US-Ethiopia trade relations. For years, the US-Ethiopia trade relationship was defined by cooperation and opportunity. Through the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, Ethiopia enjoyed duty-free access to US markets, particularly in the textile and agricultural sectors. However, that changed in January 2022, when Ethiopia was removed from eligibility for the African Growth and Opportunity Act due to human rights concerns during the Tigray conflict. The current Trump administration followed up with a blanket 10% tariff on Ethiopian goods as part of its reciprocal tariff strategy. The message was clear: match our terms or pay the price. Rationale and rollout. The Trump-era tariffs were introduced as part of a broader strategy to create what was described as a reciprocal trade environment. The idea was that if other countries imposed high tariffs on American goods, the US would respond in kind, leveling the playing field. Ethiopia, which had maintained its own tariff structure on imported goods, including those from the US, became one of the countries subject to this policy shift. However, the reality was that instead of Ethiopia imposing new tariffs on the US, it was the US that increased tariffs on Ethiopian exports, applying a blanket policy that made Ethiopian goods more expensive in the American market. While the logic behind reciprocal trade may appeal in theory, in practice, it has a different impact, especially for countries still recovering from conflict, inflation, and economic fragility. Ethiopia was not just caught in a trade dispute, it was being penalized at a time it could least afford it. Why this matters? This clarification helps us understand that the US was the initiator of the tariff change. The policy was based on reciprocity, not necessarily impartiality. Ethiopia did not impose new tariffs on the US. Instead, the US unilaterally raised tariffs to mirror or counterbalance existing trade practices. Industry impact. Let's look at the tangible effects on Ethiopia's economy. Textiles and apparel. Once a promising source of industrial job creation, Ethiopia's garment exports to the US have declined by over 45%. Coffee. As a global coffee hub, Ethiopia's exports declined as buyers sought cheaper options elsewhere. Flowers and agriculture. Floriculture, particularly the export of roses to the US, has been severely impacted, with price increases eroding competitiveness. These aren't just statistics. They represent factories that have shuttered, wages that have been lost, and thousands of livelihoods that have been disrupted. Macroeconomic consequences. The ripple effects extend beyond the industry. Foreign direct investment has slowed, as uncertainty around trade policy discourages global capital. Unemployment is rising, particularly among women and youth in the garment sector. Inflation worsens, fueled by reduced foreign exchange from exports. Tariffs are being felt in the daily lives of ordinary Ethiopians, in grocery prices, school fees, and the struggle to make ends meet. Regional and global repercussions. When Ethiopia's economy suffers, the whole Horn of Africa feels it. As a regional hub for trade, peacekeeping, and migration, economic instability in Ethiopia poses risks to broader displacement, security challenges, and cross-border tensions. And this leads us to one of the most devastating ripple effects: forced migration. The ripple effect from tariffs to migration. When people lose hope at home, they move. As industries shrink and income evaporates, we are witnessing a surge in desperate migration. Youth who once dreamed of a future in Ethiopia now risk everything, crossing deserts, seas, and borders. Families are split. Children are left behind. Skilled professionals are lost to brain drain. And the burden of migration shifts to neighboring countries, to Europe, and yes, to the borders of the United States. The price for such an endeavor, at times, is one's own life. This is the hidden cost of trade policies that fail to consider human consequences. A human-centered trade policy. It's time to shift the paradigm. A human-centered trade policy prioritizes people, stability, and mutual growth. This is not a novel idea. It reflects the very foundation of U.S. foreign assistance: fair access, not flat tariffs. Develop policies that reflect economic disparities, not just tax parity. Reward reform, not punishment. Create trade incentives tied to democratic progress, not just punishments. Support. Local job creation. Invest in key sectors to help people thrive at home. Migration as a development signal. A rising migration trend is a red flag. Trade can be the tool to reverse it. When people have an opportunity at home, they do not leave in desperation. Shared costs. U.S. consumers and global reputation. Let's not forget that tariffs also affect American consumers. Apparel prices in the United States have increased by 17% due to added import costs. GDP growth in the U.S. declined by 0.5 percentage points in 2025 due to the fallout from trade policy. And then there's the diplomatic cost. The U.S. risks losing its soft power when it penalizes vulnerable allies during times of crisis. Strategic interests. Why the U.S. should reconsider. To U.S. policymakers, this is not just about what Ethiopia stands to gain. It's also about what the United States stands to lose by not coming to the table. Opening negotiations on the 10% tariff with Ethiopia isn't just an act of goodwill, it's a strategic investment in long-term U.S. interests. Here's what it means for America. Economic access. Ethiopia, one of Africa's largest and fastest-growing populations, presents a significant market for U.S. goods and services. Fostering healthy trade now lays the groundwork for increased American business access in the future. Security and stability. Ethiopia plays a pivotal role in regional peacekeeping and counterterrorism. A stable Ethiopia supports U.S. interests in the Horn of Africa. Migration control. Economic pressure leads to displacement. Supporting economic opportunity in Ethiopia reduces the need for forced migration. A concern for both U.S. and global partners. Soft power and influence. Constructive engagement shows that the U.S. is a fair and reliable partner, especially at a time when trust in Western influence is waning across parts of Africa. But if the U.S. fails to engage, Ethiopia will have no choice but to seek alternative partnerships, and the door swings wide open to China, Russia, and other global actors ready to step in. The cost of losing ground to China and others. The geopolitical vacuum will not remain empty for long. Ethiopia, like many other African nations, will turn to China, Turkey, or Gulf states, not out of ideology, but necessity. And with that shift comes serious ramifications. Decreased US influence. As Chinese infrastructure, technology, and trade projects take root, US influence in the region will diminish. NN. Debt diplomacy risks. Without balanced partnerships, Ethiopia may fall deeper into debt arrangements that favor authoritarian regimes. N. Values displacement. The more Ethiopia aligns with non-democratic powers, the harder it becomes to promote transparency, human rights, and accountable governance, values the US has long championed. Let's be clear, this is not a matter of charity. It's a matter of smart, forward-looking diplomacy. Call for re-engagement. To US policymakers, it's time to revisit the strategy. The Trump administration has previously engaged in direct negotiations with several nations affected by the new tariff regime, creating pathways for dialogue, exemptions, or bilateral revisions. So we must ask, why not Ethiopia? Is Ethiopia too small or too geopolitically insignificant to be afforded the same opportunity for discussion? Ethiopia, a historic US partner and regional anchor in Africa, deserves more than silence. Respect in foreign policy is not just reserved for economic giants. It is owed to all nations that strive for stability, growth, and cooperation. Ethiopia into the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or establish a new framework that aligns trade with humanitarian recovery efforts. Better yet, lift the 10% tariff imposition, even if only for a given time frame. Encourage dialogue, not distance, and invest in a long-term partnership. Why weaken an alliance that has been maintained for over 110 years? To the diaspora and global advocates, speak up, contact your representatives, share this video. Trade policy must reflect human values, not just political leverage. And to the Ethiopian diaspora specifically, this is a moment to rise above division. Whether you support or oppose the current leadership, this is not about party lines or political allegiances. This is about people, factory workers, coffee farmers, students, mothers, children, whose lives are directly impacted by policies made oceans away. Let us not allow political discourse to cloud our objectives. Let us not let frustration with governance turn into silence when our voice is needed most. This is not a time for fragmentation. It is a time for unity, for clarity of purpose, and for shared responsibility. And to our global audience, especially members of the Ethiopian diaspora and all who care about fair trade, economic justice, and human dignity, we invite you to show your solidarity. Make your voice heard not just in letters to policymakers, but right here in this space. Drop a comment below with the phrase, "Ethiopia is not geopolitically insignificant." Let that be our collective affirmation, a reminder that no nation working towards stability and meaningful development should be overlooked or left behind. Your words matter. Your engagement fuels momentum. Let's make it clear, the lives of everyday Ethiopians deserve the same attention, the same dialogue, and the same dignity as any other. When we speak in one voice, grounded in justice, not in anger, we become a force that cannot be ignored. Ethiopia's integrity and the livelihood of its people are bigger than any leader or policy. Let us act like it. Here are our closing remarks. The tariffs may seem like numbers, but behind each percentage point lies a life, a worker, a mother, a migrant, a dreamer. Let us remember real leadership listens, rethinks, and rebuilds. This has been Independent Voice, where we speak for those who can't and challenge those who won't. Remember, use your voice to make a difference, not to silence others. Subscribe, like, and share. Let your voice be part of the solution.